Hey, it's Ben, and this is Drambo by BeepStreet. This video is going to be about um, the Subharmonish um, instrument rack that I have. Um, this is my approximation at the Moog Subharmonicon, which just came out. This is not a Moog Subharmonicon. It's not going to sound like a Moog Subharmonicon. But it's an attempt to kind of replicate two of the key features, which are that cool like pair of sequencers, which can do polyrhythms, and then again, it's not going to sound like a Moog instrument because it's not using the same oscillators or same filters, but you have two VCOs, and for each VCO there's two sub oscillators which are tuned to undertones or subharmonics of the bass pitch. You can also do overtones if you want, but that's here for you to play with, and I'll just kind of walk through kind of how this works, a little bit about how I built it. So first, there are some like basic instructions here under the text box, and you can read through that if you want. When you open up the rack, it's going to be playing, so just hit the trig button and it'll turn off. That's basically turning the sequencer on and off. Now you can still play with a keyboard. If you want to eliminate keyboard control, just drop down that amp, and then there won't be any signal coming in through the MIDI to sound the instrument. So then you have two sequencers. There's a CV sequencer and the gate sequencer. And I'm going to open this up so you can actually see what's going on. It's going to get really big. So the CV sequencer and gate sequencer pair are going through a note quantizer or a CV quantizer, but these three modules here kind of generate the MIDI notes. So you have whatever pitch sequence you make and the gate that are going together, going through a pitch quantizer, and then those are generating notes. The sequencers are being run by these pulse, or I guess they're impulse generators, which in turn are being driven by LFOs. And I'm going to turn this on again. So what's happening is you have LFOs that are all tuned to the exact same frequency. They're modulated by the tempo knob. So we can speed it up, we can slow it down. And then each LFO is also modulated by a pitch overtone module, which I've renamed Rhythm, 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. And that's what allows you to change the division of the clock that's running. And I think this one's running as well. So I'm going to shrink it back down, but I'll open it up one more time. So you'll see that both sequencers, CV sequencer and the gate velocity sequencer, are being clocked by this mixer. And the mixer is what's allowing the different pulses to come in from these impulse generators that are being driven by the LFOs. So that allows you to basically pick which subharmonic rhythms you want to be driving your sequencers. So I think this is on. I'm just going to turn it on, play around with it a little bit. Maybe turn the rhythm 1 down. And then if I wanted to, I could add in other rhythms to this sequencer. We'll add a rhythm to this sequencer, so 2. And then you can mess with the pattern, of course. If you wanted to, you don't have to, but you can take out certain gates. So like on certain steps of the sequencer, there won't be any note being generated. It gets just kind of hard to program, but of course you can add extra steps up to 16. And then if you want some extra polyrhythms, you can add in more rhythms. And then over here, you've got your voices, so we can just hear what one sounds like. So this is just 3 VCOs, or 3 oscillators, sounding at the same pitch, but if you start dropping the undertone, so like it's always in tune. It sounds kind of weird. It's always in tune. And you have a mixer, so you can like just have one of the sub-oscillators, you can have just sub-oscillators. In the Subharmonicon, I think one of the sub-oscillators can pulse width modulate another one. So that can sound kind of cool, like we don't even have to hear that sub. And if you want to mess around with like regular harmonics or partials, go above 0 for the overtone, that's fine too. And then you can put in any note, like instrument that you want here, but what is set up here is just like in the Subharmonicon. There is a VCA, there is a filter, and then there's a envelope generator for the filter. And I think the Moog is monophonic, like one single voice. Obviously, you can play this monophonically if you want, or you can have up to 8 voices, which can be fun. Okay, I'm gonna stop it from playing. So, just to point out, the Subharmonicon is it's semi-modular, so it has a patch bay. Just think about the kind of things that you can do with this. I couldn't figure out a clean way to implement this, but in addition to just pitch sequencing your voices, the Subharmonicon also has the option to modulate the undertone integer with the pitch sequencer. So in addition to just changing the pitch of the main voice or the main oscillator, then you're going to have, like on note 1, you'll have VCO1 and then sub 1 with an undertone relationship. But if you're also modulating the undertone integer, you're going to have a different subharmonic relationship on different steps, basically. And there's probably a cleaner way to do this. You might have to do some scaling for the CV, or if you wanted to use velocity. But I'm just saying this, you can modulate all these parameters because it's a modular setup. But I didn't feel the need to program all of that in. So we'll start this again. So now you can hear it kind of like skipping around a little bit. Now, one other thing you could do, let's just stop it. What's happening, you have your MIDI note generators for each sequencer, and they're going into a MIDI mixer. There's also MIDI just from the rack coming in, and that's what lets me like play notes on just a keyboard or whatever. So you can totally just use the voice if you want to. But what you could also do for each layer, you know, for this layer, I could have a MIDI to CV, and I could get it from the first sequencer, this MIDI note generator. And then, it's so easy to get lost in this because it's big. For the other one, I could do the same thing. I could just say like, we'll get it from the other other MIDI note generator. And one of them could be like 8 voice polyphonic, and the other one's monophonic. This could be an octave up. This could just be 1 octave up. And then we can start it again. So now, sounds kind of weird, but instead of both VCOs playing from the same sequencer, you have 2 different sequencers. And it's kind of the same rhythm, but then it's spread out between the 2 totally different instruments at that point. Last thing, you know, I'm gonna take my MIDI to CVs away. I didn't love that. You don't have to use this instrument at all, so you could just plug in maybe a, you know, FM operator if you wanted to, or any other instrument that you've made in Drambo or want to make. You know, if we start playing this, it's P-lockable. And you know, most of these parameters can be modulated as well. Again, you can increase your steps if you want. And then, you know, you don't even have to mess around with an instrument in Drambo. You could send this out to something else. So let's just add in, like, well, not another MIDI track. You know, I love Spectrum. Or Resonator. I like Resonator too, from Tim Burns. So you can just have fun with polyrhythms using the sequencer if you want to. Of course, you can change the scale if you wanted to. You might even add some extra notes to the sequencer eventually, or maybe make it a little bit longer. So it's not too overwhelming, I don't think, when it's compacted and you just have like the useful parameters. We can stop it. And then if you want to dig into it and add in extra modulation, or, you know, you could just duplicate the sequencer sections. You could add more rhythm generators. This is just a starting point, something for you to use, have fun with. And then if you really like it, you can go buy the Moog Subharmonicon. Anyways, to download this, it's at Patch Storage. There's a link in the video. But just go ahead and download it. And then, you know, open from your downloads. And when you do open it, Drambo will prompt you to save the rack somewhere, and then you can open it as a preset. Just want to mention, I do have, you know, there's another, it's on Patch Storage. Let's go. So if you just go to the Drambo page, and then right now it's close to the top. Basically, this is just a instead of the sequencer, where you kind of have to like program in your own notes and probably quantize. It uses arpeggiators, so it takes notes that you enter in. So I think that's a little bit easier. And it still gives a very similar result. So what's happening is both arpeggiators are being driven by these different rhythm generators. Both arpeggiators are being driven by the different rhythm generators. So you still have a mixer for those rhythm generators. And then I didn't bother with the Subharmonicon like voice approximation. I just have a couple FM operators. So I'm using the undertones or the overtones module to set subharmonics, but it's not like the same sound from the Subharmonicon. I just think this is a little bit simpler to get started with. Additionally, with this one, I have it labeled here as sub-arp. But basically, it's probably better to use them as like slower. It doesn't matter what you do. For me, I want to use them as like slower rhythms. And then it's mapped to a third voice or third like layer rather, and that is dropped down one undertone. And it's just a different sound. That's all. So we can mess around with it a little bit. I'll play something in, and then we have to add, one of our rhythm generators in. So right now it just sounds like a regular arpeggio. Still have our tempo control. And then once we add in additional rhythm generators, it's going to sound different. And then we can add in our extra arpeggiator. So you have two different arpeggiators. You can have different play modes. And, on one you could have it go through several octaves, play the same, whatever. It's a little bit fast. I can slow it down. I don't know. It's really fun. It's easy to get these like cool rhythms. And now if we want to add in our sub arp, we can do that. And you still have a mixer for the different layers. And of course, you could add a MIDI output module and send this just out to any other instrument or whatever. And again, this is just a starting point. So if you want to just add in a bunch of other stuff, if you want to mess around with a sequencer, you can add extra rhythm generators or extra arpeggios and route them to different places. But I thought for me, it was fun just to figure out kind of how to replicate what the Subharmonicon is doing with its sequencer, and then the sort of like the subharmonics of the oscillators. Anyways, hope you have a fun time with this. Thanks.